It's obviously a very serious issue. Everyone is taking it seriously. We're actually in the unhappy land of self-fulfilling prophecies on both sides. There's a narrative in China now that the U.S. is trying to restrain, constrain, limit China's rise, China's development. The narrative in the U.S. is that China is trying to replace the U.S., trying to ravage our economy. So we have these two self-fulfilling prophecies because when each side perceives the other side to do something that reinforces its own bias, it goes from theory into practice, which is what we're seeing now. In fact, we should be talking the opposite. There is great opportunity for the U.S. and China to work together. The bilateral relations will form the basis for world peace and prosperity in the first half of the 21st century. There are real issues, and China's transformation since it joined the WTO in 2001 are dramatic, and that must cause certain changes in China that has to occur. So whereas focusing on the trade deficit, which our president does, is not looked upon favorably by the vast majority of American economists and business leaders, there are fundamental problems in the relationship that need to be addressed that China is beginning to recognize. And I talk to experts in both countries, off the record, and there is, I find, great commonality that China recognizes it needs to open its markets more to foreign companies, not to succumb to foreign pressure, but to create more competition in the markets to drive Chinese companies to higher levels. So there are areas for commonality.
I guess the question, though, not to cut you off, is just how messy it could get until they really come to the table at a high level. There is this narrative that the Chinese stock market and its currency are under a lot of pressure right now, and they have a lot more to lose economically than we do in this trade war, and therefore President Xi will have to relent, and they'll blink first. Is that right?
If we talk about who blinks first, we're already at the wrong table. That's not the way to think about it. China has to look strong to its own people. The narrative in China is that President Xi and the party is rejuvenating the country, and Chinese nationalism and its revival is economically and politically and scientifically is a very, very important part of the structure there. So there's a public posture in both countries. All countries are that way. Nobody wants to back down or lose. But if we focus on who's blinking and who's losing, we're already in the wrong place. We should talk about how to win and how American companies can do more business in China, not less.
So in those off-the-record conversations you're having on the U.S. side, is there a realization of that and how to actually make that happen? In other words, don't allow the Chinese to lose
face? Yeah, but those guys are not in power.
Okay. The guys you're talking to off the record are not in power.
Right.
So then that doesn't sound good.
Well, that's correct. The people in power, I'd say, have a more limited view of things. But so it's easy to be a good prognosticator in the long term, but really lousy in the short term. So I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen tomorrow at the trade conversation or next week. But I really do think over a number of years, a short number of years, we'll see great commonality between the U.S. and China because it makes economic sense for both sides and for companies on both sides.